on several different fronts. I know we have an official welcome for you on tomorrow. But if you would just take a moment to introduce your colleagues at the table with you and then start at your leisure.
Thank you. At the table with me is the chair of the Board of Trustees, well known to you, Nancy Blosser. We have on this side the provost of the university, John Pritchard, who I remind you stepped in with great service to the institution and the state as interim president for the last year. I have Sharon Ronco, who's the vice provost for institutional research, and David Mann, our government relations director.
If I could, I'd just like to say John was an improvement.
You're stealing Frank's line. Thank you first for offering me this wonderful tutorial on the state system. I appreciate you organizing this for my benefit. I've been on the job a week and a half, and I'm just thrilled to be back in the state of Florida and thrilled to be part of this great university system and president of this wonderful university. We're going to start out with a couple of remarks by Chair Blosser.
Thank you, MJ. Madam Chair and Governors, it was just a little less than a year ago that you tapped our then President Frank Brogan to be Chancellor of the state university system. I might add that I'm just at the point that I can forgive you for that.
They're ready to give me back. It's okay. A little of me goes a long way.
Tomorrow, I will be describing the search that we undertook for a new president, and I will be asking for this board to confirm the appointment of M.J. Saunders as the sixth president of FAU, as recommended by our Board of Trustees. She began just 10 days ago, and she assumed the role of president and the challenge that combines our board's expectation for exceptional leadership, academic innovation, fundraising prowess, and a commitment to the community and economic development. We know that she will do this with respect for our mission and our history, and with vision for the many, many possibilities that are ahead. Our entire university community is excited about our future under the leadership of Dr. Saunders, and we look forward very much to your vote of confirmation of her tomorrow. MJ, I'll turn it back to you.
What I'd like to do is first orient you to Florida Atlantic University and some of the things that are unique about this part of the system. We have hit a high point in students entering this fall with 27,000. The relationship of undergraduate to graduate is about 80% undergraduate and about 20% graduate. That's a mix that we think might change in the next few years to increasing graduate student offerings. In the Carnegie classification, you've heard this from the other university presidents, we're classified as high research activity, which is the tier 2 of the research institutions. What's very interesting about our university is the 7 sites that we offer programming on that span 150 miles of the coast. So we have an additional challenge and opportunity in having courses range from Fort Lauderdale up to the Port St. Lucie area, and again a mix in needs of the community from very urban to very rural. One other thing about that distribution is that we co-share sites on our campuses with community colleges who have all become state colleges. So when I left the Florida system, you had that very strong articulation of 2+2, and I think this is going to be a special challenge to us because even on our main campus, we co-locate with new state colleges. We have an enormous number of part-time students, and that is, again, one of the strengths of the institution, that it's serving the working population in its area. We have a lot of diversity that the institution is very, very proud of, what it brings to the institution, of the second largest degree grantor for African American baccalaureates, and additionally the second largest in the system for baccalaureate degrees to Hispanic students. So we have a great mix of undergraduate and graduate students at the institution. We've talked a lot about the need-based scholarship and the Pell Grants. 30% of our undergraduates receive Pell Grants, and the median family income of those students is $21,000 a year. So we're very aware of the need for affordable education for the students at Florida Atlantic. One thing that we've heard other university presidents talk about is the move from commuter students to residential life, what that brings to the institution, and how that helps you compete in the market against the state colleges that may offer similar degrees at a lower cost. And we believe that moving from commuter to a more residential campus is very, very important for the students. If you look at the students who want to live in our dormitories on campus, there's a long, long waiting list, and we can only provide housing for first-year students. I think every crane in Florida is on campus right now building Innovation Village, and which is already fully subscribed for when it will open in fall 11. Again, a piece of residential life that we feel it's very, very important to increase on the Boca campus. Again, if you look that we are sitting in an urban area that represents about 3.5 million Floridians, one of the things that we do for service to the community, which I believe is deeply embedded in a public university mission, is that we have many, many, many seniors come to campus, about 35,000 a year, enroll in our lifelong learning offerings. So that provides a richness of experience using the campus for these citizens. And again, our economic impact, everyone talks about that. Right now it's at about $1.2 billion. We do believe with the medical school, which you have just approved, that number should grow substantially. Some of our core strengths are the fact that we have been serving what's called the new traditional student. Students that are older, minority students, students that come to college part-time, that are employed. And when we talk about our course offerings, programs, when we deliver courses, how we deliver courses, it's very important to serve those students well. The enrollment statistics mirror those of our region, which we're very proud of. And we have large numbers of transfer students with very, very strong graduation rates from the many former community colleges in the area, now all state colleges. We have a center of excellence in ocean engineering technology, and as you see all the interest on what's going on about energy worldwide, we think this will become of increasing importance to the state. What are our challenges? You have heard some of these same challenges from the other university presidents. Clearly, graduation rate is one that's important for all of us. Retention, progress toward degree, and ultimately graduation rates. And that's something that we have invested time and money in the recent past to, with great results, and I think we need to continue to pay attention to it in the future. The research funding, you've had university presidents talk to you about the hallmark of what a university education is that's different from a college education or a community college education. And those researchers bring that excitement, that talent, that creativity to all levels of instruction at a university. And we believe it's very, very important for us to grow our research funding. Expanding the funding sources. I noticed that the chair did not let me off the hook and mentioned increased philanthropy. You know, as the traditional sources of funding change in public higher education, You have to continually look for new resources. You have to look for those federal grants that you're eligible for, such as the TRIO program, which we're eligible for our minority students. You have to look for those federal research dollars coming in, and you have to look for your community support and philanthropic endeavors. And so we need to pay attention to that. And again, along with the research focus is growing graduate education. We were asked to provide list of peers, and this list of peer institutions was approved in the last strategic planning process, which took place starting in 2006. And so as I move forward in my presidency, this is something that we will revisit, what we met in goals of that strategic plan, what has changed in that period of time for the institution, and how we can move forward best with the resources at hand, with new partnerships, which I will talk about, that are opportunities for us, and some of the things that have happened that have changed the landscape in that period of time. I'd like to note a couple of things on this. If you look at the University of Louisville and Virginia Commonwealth University's research expenditures, those are the ones in the 6 digits. Those institutions both have fully established medical schools. And so if you just look at the impact of having a medical school on your research dollars, it looks like about $100 million in annual funding you can expect from $100 million, I said the wrong thing, I'm sorry, there's an extra 3 zeros there, in annual funding that you would get with the expectation of a fully operational medical school, and that's something that we aspire to with the newly approved medical school coming on board. We were asked to look at the next 5 to 10 years and some of the things on the horizon that match up with the strategic plan. And of course, we want to be a first-choice institution for excellence and accessible education, and I think that word accessible remains very, very important for Florida Atlantic University. And we have up there the newly inaugurated medical school, which I think will change the tenor of not only the medical school delivery in the area, but also an impact on our undergraduate students and also on our research productivity and our relationship with community partners. You've heard a lot about e-learning. That was one of the things that the institution I came from had just made tremendous progress in, both working on statewide proposals for e-learning, to each institution developing more e-learning. And it's very, very helpful in a situation like Florida Atlantic, where you might be at physical capacity in your buildings. And again, the mix of students that we have, you've heard a lot about how e-learning is really, really good for the non-traditional student. We are very, very committed to increasing the Boca campus for amenities for students. We think allowing these students to have the full campus experience, having more dorms on campus, having more student services on campus, leads to retention, leads to loyalty to the institution, and provides a full university experience for these students. Collaboration with regional partners. As you know, we have been blessed with having the state support Scripps Florida coming to the Jupiter site of Florida Atlantic. We will do groundbreaking next Tuesday with Max Planck for their building on the Jupiter campus, of which we have loaned them space to get up and started. Torrey Pines has moved to that region, again in molecular biology. But we also look to the area hospitals, the Cleveland Clinic, the Boca Raton Community Hospital for partnerships as medical education becomes independent of the University of Miami. And of course, long-standing partnerships with the school district, with NOAA, and with information on marine and atmospheric sciences with the University of Miami. I'd like to point out on creativity and research, I'd like to jump down to bullet number 4, just because we're a little limited in time, and talk about CAKE. This is a Center for Advanced Knowledge Enablement that does all the right things. It brings together university and industry partners. It is funded by the federal government, and it's also a collaboration with the neighboring university. And I think these are the kinds of collaborations that will help to build the new Florida economy, and these are the kinds of steps that universities are already taking. Our contribution to New Florida, we have a research park that has 23 businesses in the research park and employs about 640 people already. The Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute recently became part of Florida Atlantic University, and that should bring in research dollars for faculty focused on things that are important for the local economy, like aquaculture and the marine ecosystems. 3 of those faculty were on NBC Nightly News Tuesday night, talking about the impact of the oil spill on ecosystems. And we can see then that they're already recognized as national experts. I think the joint MD-PhD program with Scripps is going to be incredibly important. People talk about the lag in the movement of development at the bench to the bedside. And how can we accelerate that process of the discoveries that scientists make, PhD scientists working in their laboratories, to things that are important for patient care. And it's these kind of MD, PhD programs that develop the entrepreneurs, that do the startup companies, that invent the new technologies that will make it into the medical field much quicker than the traditional route. Again, we're committed to helping improve the workforce. Important in that is not just sometimes we talk about the STEM degrees, the science and technology engineering degrees, but we need to remember that all those startup businesses need accountants, need CEOs, and there's a lot to be said for building the entrepreneurial spirit in the schools of business also. We have the Adams Center for Entrepreneurship, and that was a collaboration between engineering and business, and we've recently extended that platform from all the colleges to participate in building entrepreneurship. You asked about some short-term initiatives in the work plan, and these are things that the institution started primarily with external funding that was new to the institution from selling some of the band licensing to Clearwire Technologies. They have already made great strides in improving the retention of students through a mechanism called supplemental instruction, by paying attention to courses such as the freshman math courses that had high failure rates, and increasing the success of students by providing extra tutors, peer mentoring, all the right things that you need to do to get these students through these courses. Also, faculty learning communities on how to teach well. The Division of Research put out a call for proposals for interdisciplinary research, and again, you've heard that from other presidents. The federal government now, only about 50% of the federal government grants from NSF and NIH go to single investigators. 50% of the money has migrated toward team projects. And so we set together calls for proposals for interdisciplinary research and got 43 proposals from the faculty, representing hundreds of faculty from all the colleges saying they wanted to participate in a renewal of research, of partnering with faculty from other colleges. And the ones that rose to the top through external evaluation were on climate change, brain function damage and repair, and healthy aging, things that are important both for the location of our institution and for our partnerships with the nationally known, internationally known partners that have come to town. We also need to upgrade the technology infrastructure. You heard the University of Florida talk about its tracking of students to degree. There are other programs out there which we need to implement. Graduation check, where a student goes in and uses electronic resources in addition to the face-to-face advising that you need to complete your degree on time. These programs are wonderful, they're interactive, and they really help the student chart their own course and also flag when there are problems with the student movement through the system and allow an intervention very early on. Enrollment plan, this is something we may revisit. We had proposed a flat enrollment plan, but I think we need to revisit that and perhaps project some growth in the institution coming up. I do mention there again that the relationships with the state colleges may impact our institution more than some of the other institutions in the state because of the co-localization. And I really appreciate that this board and that our chancellor will take on a statewide discussion of how that's going to progress to serve our students well. You see the last bullet there, again, one of the changes in our enrollment pattern will be our own independent medical school, which will admit its first class next fall, and we're very excited about the possibilities of that. New degrees under development, they tend to be professional science masters. It's a very conservative outlook. What you see on the bottom there is the new College of Engineering building that's going to open this fall that was designed so that the students could actually look at the infrastructure of the building, understand the energy use in the building, and it will be a living laboratory. It is the first building in the state that's an academic research building that is the Platinum LEED certified. So what a wonderful opportunity for our own students to be able to see how that building functions and be able to do some hands-on working with the functions of the building that they're being educated in. On differential tuition, you've heard again from the other institutions. If you look at the last two bars here, that's our 2009-2010 funding for academic programs, and the next one is the next year's budget. The small yellow bar is the differential tuition. To put it in perspective, to tuition, which is the red bar, the gray and blue bars are the E&G funding that we get. The gray bar is the fixed costs. The blue bar is what's available for the academic mission. Embedded in that is also the new dollars that came to the institution for the medical school and harbor branch. So it looks a little rosier than it really is because we took on two other major endeavors in that time. And the green is the stimulus funding that will go away. And as you see on the bottom, that differential tuition last year was used to continue to offer sections that would have been canceled for lack of money for instructors, and also the need-based grant. For the future, we've requested the full 7%. I've given you what it will generate there, how much will be taken off of financial aid, and what are we going to do with that? The first bullet of the 9 advisors, that has a price tag of about $400,000. The improvement for supplemental instruction, that has a price tag of about $300,000. The remainder will be used for improved access to courses offering sections. And I'd like to point to when we do hire faculty as replacement faculty, we have no growth in faculty at this institution, but we are able to attract faculty from premier institutions around the country. And so I'm very proud of the fact that some of our faculty coming in this fall, being hired with this money, come from Cornell, Harvard, Stanford, Ohio State, and University of Pennsylvania. And I think that shows the attractiveness of this university and this system to faculty. So I'm very pleased to be a part of the team here, and I thank you all, and we're very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, President Saunders. It's like not even a question to me that Governor Tripp would be the first person to ask a question for FAU.
But he told me he would ask it of Nancy.
Governor Tripp.
Not a question.
Yes.
I just want to compliment Chairwoman Nancy Blosser. Great leadership skills in making this transition from our chancellor to the new president, and you're to be commended because you did just a fantastic job. Very proud of you.
Well,
You're here.
thank you. I'm very excited about the future of this institution. It does all the right things.
Governor Hussaini?
Madam President, I hope you know that your Chancellor and your Chairman made a commitment to our board about residency. So I want you to know that every time I see you, I'm going to ask you that question. And that as the commitment was that, it's just an unbelievable partnership the way you have set it up. As I mentioned to the chair lady, that I wrote a editorial in a local paper, and I talked about your partnership that you have established between your school and the local hospitals that is going to create 300 residency. Thus, there's no need for our students when they finish medical school and you have spent those millions of dollars, they don't have to leave the state. So I hope you stay with that commitment. I hope you know all about it, and so that you know that every time I see you, I will ask you about that program. Because if that program works, it would work for the rest of the state. So we do not have to send lots of our students out of the area, which 75% of them, once they leave the area for residency, they won't come back.
Right. No, I was so pleased by the incredible support of the CEOs of the local hospitals to come forward and pledge that they will work very carefully with us to open residency opportunities, and ones that did not exist with the partnership that we had with Miami. So there'll be new residency programs coming on board, and I'm very excited about that. I didn't feel I could talk about that since that's not, the ink isn't dry on those, and so we certainly will keep you up to date with what's happening.
Thank you. And I want to take the same opportunity to thank Nancy as chairwoman of FAU. I mean, you've done a lot for the university, and thank you for your commitment, Nancy.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? Yes. Governor Stavros.
President MJ, let me just say, no matter how great in any organization, no matter how great the previous president was, the new president with a great foundation can and will do better.
Yes.
Just want to make
No.
that clear.
Gus, you
There's
always...
a compliment in there somewhere.
You always stand on the shoulders of those that went before, and the chancellor left this institution in wonderful financial shape. He had committed to all the right things to build a great institution, and that's why it is really such an attractive job.
Governor Colson.
A line that I asked President Machen about. What do you think it's going to take to get FAU moved up significantly in the rankings? And what are reasonable goals for the next 5 years in terms of your rankings amongst the publics? And what will it cost to get there?
Well, I think that I hope that the state's finances become stabilized, because that is critical to attracting people to a university or system. It's a small world out there, and people know what's going on in different states. And so that's important that we have some forward planning for how we're going to deal with the budget. You always have opportunities with new hires, replacement hires as your faculty retire, that you need to do your best job possible of attracting the right people. And if you can do that and you build a cadre of people in focused areas, I think that's another important thing. We cannot be all things to all people. And you have to find out what's important for the region you sit in so that those partnerships can leverage every dollar that you have from the state. So we're tremendously fortunate now of being in an area where there are places for great partnerships. It helps the faculty to succeed in research if they come into an area where they can be jump-started by partnering with an established organization or having a problem present to them. We go from looking at research in sort of a esoteric way to a little bit more practical way when you get your first faculty job of who can I count on now? I've got to find a whole new set of collaborators. So those selections of faculty are very critical to bring people in that are not working in isolation, that can find strong partners, that can find research problems of which they can work with local concerns. And that's where I think we're very fortunate now with the strength that Scripps and Max Planck and Torrey Pines and the collaborations with the med school will bring on board, because then that's a natural. And it's going to be much easier to attract faculty in those areas if they see those partnerships as workable, established, and helpful. So that's one way you go about doing it, is you focus what you do and you go after the best people and you give them the tools they need to succeed. There's no doubt everyone's given you the same pitch about the fact that ultimately there is a cost to a research institution. There's a cost to being a university that's different than the cost of a high school, a community college, or a college. And you all have the graphs, and you've seen the investment that's essential to become, again, a great system. I was very happy to come back to Florida, and one of the reasons was that the state does invest in higher education. If you look at the distribution on those charts of the state versus what the individual invests in higher ed, Florida's always been a leader in saying this is a public good. We're going to take it on as a responsibility for all the citizens to share in this, as opposed to just the individual saying, you are getting the benefit of going to college, you pay the tuition bill. I think some of that is shifting because of the necessity, because of the limited state funding, to make that up. But I'd hope that the state continues its commitment to the university system and recognizes its value.
Let me just have a quick thought. I could argue that the state has put $300 million in Scripps on your campus, and we have just approved a medical school for your campus, and perhaps it's reasonable for us to hope that you would aspire to be a top 50 public university in the next decade with the synergy that's possible about what's going on in your new leadership. But is that a reasonable goal, or is that too high an expectation?
Well, my prior experience in the state was at the University of South Florida, which is very dear to my heart. And when I went to South Florida, it's about the size that Florida Atlantic is now. And they grew their research from about $40 million to over $200 million in a short period of time by having things like Moffitt Cancer Institute come, Moffitt attracting terrific faculty, investment in strategic areas. So yes, the model is out there, and the model is out there even within the state university system of how you grow to be a Research 1 institution from a Tier 2 institution. And so, we've had great examples in the state of universities that have accomplished that, and the roadmap is there. And the elements for that achievement, a lot of them are in place right now. So you're absolutely right.
Governor Edwards?
Madam President, not only was John a substantial improvement over Frank, but Nancy was a tremendous improvement over Norm. With that said, our state is going to be under tremendous pressure, not immediately. I'm trying to see how many people I can insult today.
You're doing a good job.
Now, that was a compliment.
No, I'm not going to ask for a vote as to whether my positions were correct or not. But going back to the access issue and the issue of branch campuses versus more state universities, I don't know about LSU and I don't know about Cleveland State. I know you were at South Florida and had a chance to experience their operation. You are stepping into one of our universities with a major branch operation. Mm-hmm. How do you see that, and how do you think our board needs to look at that type of an issue as we move forward in our long-range planning?
there's no easy answer to your question, so I won't be glib about it. But with the number of branch campuses, I do believe this is a conversation with the Board of Trustees about mission of the different campuses. I do believe an absolutely just lay it on the table, look at the costs of some of the branch campuses with the opportunities of the state colleges at the same campus. I think that it can no longer just be personalities or handshake deals between presidents about what you're going to offer or not offer. I think there has to be some decisions at the state level about how the citizens in different regions will have access to higher education. You absolutely, we heard about needs assessment. Not only do state colleges do needs assessments, but you know, all the universities, and especially at these branch campuses, do needs assessments of the community that's its surrounding. So I think that we have some important opportunities. The Jupiter campus has been home only to our honors college, yet that is where the big biomedical giants now sit. So the question about the future of that campus is very, very important. Indian River State College is on our Port St. Lucie campus and very aggressively pursuing baccalaureate degrees. We share our campus with Palm Beach College. That's a very good relationship. So I think that each of these branches is going to have a strategic plan, and the strategic plan has to be based on what is the best for the citizens that it is serving and how best to provide that education, and leave some of the, you know, it's mine, it's yours, you know, off the table, and start with that as the deciding factor of how you're going to make decisions about the futures of these campuses. We have not yet started at all this discussion, so this is very premature for me to say this, but I think it's going to be something that has to come sooner rather than later. Absolutely.
Governor Beard.
I have kind of a technical question. Under your retention and graduation rates, as Bernie said, President Matcham said, you can't really compare y'all with the University of Florida because you have 50% students that are full-time and the rest aren't, where he's got 90% or 80 to 90% full-time, and yours is 35 and his is 90. But the 35 doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I wonder if there's a way, and I'm kind of asking the board to maybe break it down to full-time students and not full-time students, or if there's a better way to look at it, because 35% means doesn't really compute.
The reality of that number is that is a comparable number. That's first-time, full-time in college. So that's collected nationally. So that is our students who start as freshmen full-time.
So that is.
If, however, you look at our baccalaureate degrees, only about 28% of the students that get a baccalaureate degree started as freshmen. So you've got a blending of things here.
Yeah.
You've got a first-time, full-time cohort that is not very successful, and that's a problem. But part of what you need to compare there, and some universities have started this, and this is a national discussion, is what would your projected graduation rate be of those students? And that's where you take into account the college preparedness of those students, their ACT or SAT scores, there's whether they're first time in college, whether they're residential, non-residential, whether they're minority, non-minority, whether they're male or female, whether they're in-state, outer-state. There are a series of nationally known risk factors that predict graduation rate. A lot of it actually is correlated with family income. That's one of the strongest correlators, whether they're Pell Grant eligible or not. So one thing that you can do in helping to understand the success rates is who's coming in. So if you have a student that's from a wealthy family, that's living on campus, that has a high SAT, that is not working, that his parents went to college, there's an expectation of close to 100% that they graduate in 6 years. You take a student who's the first time in college, working, a low family income, a low, perhaps high school preparation for college work in remedial courses, etc., you've got a much lower predictor of success. So sometimes you might want to benchmark against that. Are you doing a good job with the population of students you serve? And we would all like to be at that 80 and 90%, and I think it's an important thing to strive for. But what really is the expectation nationally of a student with that profile? So some of those are comparable, and then again, those numbers, you won't know all this. Sometimes they get mixed. Sometimes you're able, if they graduate from any place in the system, you can count them as a success for you. Other times you can only count them if they graduated from your institution. So if we sit there with community colleges or state colleges and our students are migrating in and out, perhaps starting here, moving to a community college, maybe moving back in, moving back out, they may graduate from a different institution, and you may or may not be able to count that in your graduation rate, depending on how the people that run the numbers decided to call for the information.
But how does it work with full-time students versus non-full-time students? I mean, if you've got 50% of your students going part-time, isn't that going to change the numbers?
Not for that group. That is that group that entered as a class in a particular year. So you'll be looking at the class that entered in 2002. In 2008, you'll be asking how many graduated. I think this state collects information on transfer student success, so you'll also be looking at students who came in with an AA degree or perhaps 30 units and map their rate for successful graduation, and I think that's close to 60%.
I think the point is, back to your original question, and it's a good one. If you just take at face value a 6-year graduation rate, first of all, there are many people, probably none in this room, but there are many people who believe that that means that if you don't graduate in 6 years, you don't graduate. That's not true. Graduation of 6 years is based on a cohort of students nationally, the 6-year graduation rate, who start together, and if any of those students fall out of that cohort anywhere along the way, take those part-time students who are working and can't carry a full-time course load, therefore mathematically it becomes impossible for them to graduate in 6 years. That's held against the 6-year graduation rate, and it should be, but it doesn't mean that student doesn't graduate. It just means they don't graduate with their cohort. So to President Matchen's point, and it's a good one, it starts with, a lot of it starts with the entrance requirements. If you have substantially higher entrance requirements for students, you know automatically that the chances, generally speaking, for the 6-year graduation rate and retention rates to be great are higher based on just the admission requirements. Doesn't mean completely. There are things you can do regardless of the admission rates to generate more. You even heard him say they'd like to get theirs up. But it is a great predictor when you get into those sorts of numerators and denominators. And that's why it's so important, FAU a good example, to dig in and find out how many of those 27,000 plus students are community college transfer students. How many of those students are other transfers? And when you get to FAU, you find out still, I'm assuming the lion's share of that 27,000 have transferred in from somewhere else with credits, which takes them out of the 6-year graduation cohort. So when you get down to that 6-year graduation rate, you're probably putting that on the back of how many students, Sharon? So out of 27,000 students, that 6-year graduation rate applies to 2,700. So you can automatically see how it's skewed. Doesn't mean that they can't and don't want to do better with that 2,500, but it sure puts it into context when you think, gosh, the graduation rate, a 6-year graduation rate at FAU is only that. Well, that's for that particular cohort or size of student that you're counting. So it is important to know what each university looks like, full-time, part-time. It is important to know how many other transfers they have, how many community college transfers they have, and look at the groups within the group to better dissect and understand. That's what they do, for example, when they do their strategic plan. I assume all universities do. They don't look at just the 6-year graduation rate. They look at each of those groups of students that make up the whole and try to determine how to get their graduation rate and retention rates up, not just the overall 6-year graduation rate, if that makes sense. So it's a very good question, and you're right on point. There are the numbers within the numbers.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Any other question? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I am.
Get back to work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you in the morning. Actually, Chair Blosser and President Saunders, we look forward to seeing you in the morning.
Oh,
All right.